Here's my question, and you listeners will understand what I mean. Who, in your view, is the inheritor of culture? Full stop.
Will they know what you mean?
I mean, there's a line in here. I think it might be that we have seen Victor Hugo at his unself-conscious, raw, most extreme in this passage for today.
He really let loose, that's for sure.
He did. He cut loose. In fact, he at one point stepped from behind the veil and decided to speak to you as the author and characterize his own work.
Tell us what his book was. Yep.
Which is an attempt to usher the mind of man to God, which is seems a little.
I still quibble about your definition of that sentence, but we can get to that.
Yeah,
later.
We can get to that later. But like, I just can't even with the reading for today. We have like 3 plot points sprinkled amid dozens of pages of some of the most exaggerated hyperbole I think I've ever read.
Well, yeah.
Exaggerated hyperbole? Is that a thing? I mean, I defend myself.
Accurate.
Victor Hugo could say it. He would say it. He would say exaggerated hyperbole. He would find 4 other words for hyperbole and string them all together in the same sentence. Megan, you go.
No, I don't think I could have said it better myself. It did feel like what Victor Hugo has been offering us in terms of like a literary genre all this time is romanticism, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's an overblown and dramatized way of looking at the world with thematic significance.
Right.
So he is using hyperbole and has been all along on purpose. But he did sort of, he full sent in this section.
I feel like Victor Hugo is the author version of Tom Cruise jumping a motorcycle off a cliff. And you're like, you're getting old, bro. Is this a good idea?
I wonder if we're going to encounter that a lot on this podcast. I wonder, because the bloviators, as you put them, the ones who expand instead of contract, are the romantics. And it's all the same time period. It's the same time period as Tolstoy.
They gave us all the elephants.
It's the same time period.
They just needed an editor.
It's the same time period as like Moby Dick, although Moby Dick is better than it doesn't it's not quite
shots
as
fired.
I realized I did not mean like quality wise. I meant more like it doesn't do the same thing that Hugo's doing. But I do think that's the case. And so we're gonna probably encounter this a lot.
Yep.
I'm just gonna read this as an example. So at the top of page 1238 in my edition, so this is the part where I looked across the room at Emily and I said, you have 20 pages coming up of just ridiculousness. And
5.
She looks at me and she goes, it's 5. And I said, it felt like 20. So 1238, he opens after speaking for such a long time on the same theme and just a million different metaphors stacking on top of one another when one would have done. And I was so frustrated. And I encountered this sentence: one more word before returning to the fray. And I wrote next to it, like, I bet not.
Doubt it.
So at the bottom of that page, he says, the book the reader now has before his eyes, from one end to the other, in its whole and in its details, whatever the omissions, the exceptions, or the faults, is the march from evil to good, from injustice to justice, from the false to the true, from night to day, from appetite to conscience, from rottenness to life, from brutality to duty, from hell to heaven, from nothingness to God. Starting point, matter. Goal, the soul. Hydra at the beginning, angel at the end.
Okay, so what I hear him saying is that this book is an embodiment of progress, and he's capturing a moment in time that he sees as like a crux of the march of progress. Mm-hmm. And he does believe, we can say this finally and for sure, he does believe mankind is on like a Hegelian march towards some kind of utopia.
Right.
And it just isn't necessarily a straight line, because we pause, we sometimes go backwards a little bit, but the general graph is always going to be upwards.
Right, but only in one very specific place, France. The general line is going to be upwards in France.
Well, France is leading the vanguard now, is what he thinks. Yes.
Is this a historically supportable comment? I mean, he's been a decent historian throughout, I feel.
Well, this is definitely like romantic Hegelian philosophy. It's very, again, very similar to Tolstoy. Tolstoy thought it
Right.
was Russia leading the vanguard.
He was capable of nationalism too.
Yep. Hugo thinks it's France. Hegel thought it was Germany. It's just, this is very time, like this is of its time in a
Mhm.
big way.
That's a very moderating comment, but I gotta say again, rank nationalist much? Rank in the sense of smelly, people. I mean, goodness gracious. At one point, he calls out what I would argue is objectively a much more successful revolution across the water on our side of the pond and throws shade.
Well, it's because
I love that Ian is so offended for America.
It's not, no. It has nothing to do with
Listen,
America.
Hugo, you touched a sacred cow.
No. That's not even true. It's
Sorry, go ahead.
literally just that if we're talking, he's looking at the world and he's saying revolution is essentially noble because it's humanity doing what humanity was made to do, yearning for something better, yearning towards utopia. Right. And when individual rights are threatened, mankind rises up. And he's been very realistic, frankly, for a romantic about revolution. He said, look, it's messy. It contains all of the worst of mankind as well as all of the best. I choose to focus on the best, et cetera, right? With all of these thoughts about revolution, he's examining a failed one in France and has the temerity to say this failed one is the vanguard of human culture. While currently, over the water, the first revolution, the one that came before the French Revolution, and the one that didn't slaughter at the hands of the guillotine an entire culture is going on. And look, I wouldn't have a problem with him not mentioning it at all, but instead he throws shade at it.
You are speaking as someone from the 21st century, though. I mean, it's not that I disagree with you. It's just that you're an exaggerator. And so I feel like I have to stand in the gap.
Well, so what you're saying is that me and Hugo deserve each other. That's what you're saying.
Yes, 100%. Okay, so 2 points to what you just said. The first is that he would not consider the French Revolution a failed one. He's writing with the perspective of 1848 in mind, which he opens this book with.
Right.
And that was a successful campaign. Louis Philippe is deposed. The Republic of France is created. It actually is still successful today. So that happens. And then when it comes to America, he's writing in the 1800s. America is still practicing slavery,
right.
or this book might have been published a little after. But Civil War is the context here. So
right.
And he is very clear at certain points in this novel that he is an abolitionist.
Yeah, that's fair.
Of slaves and women, etc. And so when he looks across the water, he does see a failed revolution because it has not successfully achieved its aims.
Mankind. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All of that is fair. And dear listeners, take Emily's part here, but I got one more shot to throw. The modern ideal has its model in art and its means in science. It is through science that we shall realize that august vision of the poets, social beauty. We shall reproduce Eden by A plus B. At the point civilization has reached, the exact is a necessary element of the splendid, and the artistic sentiment is not merely served, but completed by the scientific organ. Dream must calculate. Art, which is the conqueror, must bear on science, which is the mover. The solidity of the base is important. The modern spirit is the genius of Greece, with genius of India for its vehicle. Alexander on the elephant. Then a couple of pages later, he says, or a couple of paragraphs later, he says, France is of the same quality of people as Greece and Italy. She is Athenian via the beautiful and Roman via the great. In addition, she is good. Really? She gives herself. She is more often than the other peoples in the spirit of devotion and sacrifice, except that this spirit takes her and leaves her, and he begins to make excuses before throwing this shot. France has her relapses of materialism, and at certain moments, the ideas that obstruct that sublime brain lack anything that recalls French greatness and take on the dimensions of a Missouri.
South.
Or South Carolina. I understand they're in the South. What is to be done? The giantess is playing the dwarf. Immense France has her childish whims. That is all. So if I take your meaning, Emily, because the French weren't engaged in slavery, they get a pass. And become the inheritors.
Well, no, he's clearly not giving France entirely a pass. I mean, we're in the middle of revolution right now, and the French are not doing a good job, but the people are fighting against it. it's the whole complex thing there, but I do think he would say the spirit of the people is more in line with the principles of progress than in America, where there seems to be an inherent materialism. And, he's not entirely wrong about that. But two things. One, I got distracted because I really think we need a t-shirt of maybe not Alexander, but like Victor Hugo riding on an elephant.
Yeah.
For our podcast.
Oh my gosh, we totally do. How to
Alexander
ride
and
an elephant. That's what we put underneath
How
it.
to ride
How to
ride. If you would wear that t-shirt, please come to our Facebook page and drop a comment.
I
We
just
will
want to know
make
how
them.
we're going to sketch Victor Hugo. Like, how are we going to make it obvious
Megan,
that it's him?
you're the artist. So get working.
I'm going to work on this.
I don't think it's
I
possible
also
to
just
sketch
realized
Hugo without making him Napoleon,
I'm
is it?
drinking out of my elephant mug today.
Oh
This
my
feels
gosh.
like a
this is
podcast
so
appropriate for those watching on YouTube.
Mm.
Okay, second thing, the passage you read, I agree, is problematic. It's that is a holder over of Enlightenment thinking,
Yeah.
that he thinks that science is capable of defining truth. Rationality is capable of leading us to truth.
Yeah, education is the ultimate light.
Yeah, and this focus on progress, right? What do you actually, this might be a bit of a distraction, but do you agree with Hugo that A, as society moves along, progress is what we're encountering, and B, that it is an ultimate good?
We interestingly, as a company, had to listen to that episode on Leo Strauss. And even though I have all kinds of problems with his thinking, there was an interesting part of the podcast that pointed out the fact that Strauss, he noted that when we look at progress, we're only, if those Enlightenment thinkers are only looking at certain markers and ignoring other markers. So when we, yes, modern medicine, democracy, et cetera, like there are certain markers where it does indeed look like progress, but when it comes to more permanent things, maybe not so much.
Ian, can you articulate your question again?
Yeah, it seems like Hugo is filtering everything he sees about society, at least. Maybe not about the human spirit and the individual, but about society through the lens of progress. Provided that we are moving forward, all is well, fundamentally, such that progress is the ultimate good. It's the ultimate barometer of a successful culture. I wonder what we think about that.
Well, I don't know if this goes with what you were saying, Emily, but my first thought is in what category is he charting progress? So I think I would use the word category. You used the word marker. There are lots of different areas in which progress can be charted. And he is being very broad with his treatment of the word. But I think that there is a section, I was looking for it just now and couldn't find it. There's a big long section. I think it's Enjolras is speaking, but I heard Hugo in him trying to define the three principles of the French Revolution: liberty, equality, and brotherhood.
Yeah.
And he basically offers those three principles as ways to chart progress. If a society has managed to present liberty on the shoulders of brotherly love and founded in the equality of all mankind, then it is a successful society that is working towards progress. That seems to be the clearest articulation of his definition of progress that I'd heard him articulate.
Yeah.
We're kind of getting into the meat of the matter. I wonder if we should step back for a second and just kind of talk about the shape of this book one of Jean Valjean.
Yeah. So a lot of a very small number of very important things happens in this section. I suppose the quickest summary would be we watch the boys at the barricade heroically defend it against an oncoming regiment and then eventually die without exceptions. The only people that escape are Valjean and Marius.
R.I.P. I thought Grantaire, this is jumping ahead, but I thought Grantaire's role in that was tragic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, every bit of it was tragic. The whole thing, the scene where there are four basically National Guard costumes
Mhm.
that they could put on, and they all are trying to decide which 4 men need to go home and take up their responsibilities, to give up their deaths on the barricade and go home and take care of their families instead.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're all trying to avoid that. They all want to die. It's a suicide attempt. And
Right.
Which is,
it was really thought provoking.
yeah, it seems to go hand in hand with the discussion that Hugo has about the tension between individuality and humanity in its progress, and how individuality kind of butts up against it and makes its own claims. And but in this section, the section you're talking about, Megan, it seems very positive that these men are being sent home to take care of their mothers and sisters and daughters, because Hugo has shown us what happens when women are abandoned in this civilization.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't tell what Hugo wanted us to feel in that scene, because on the one hand, I think it was Courfeyrac is the one speaking, and he's telling everyone, you need to remember your responsibilities, think of all the people who are relying on you. It's very noble to give up your life, so long as that sacrifice doesn't extend to anyone else. But if anyone else is affected by you dying today, then actually you're hurting someone else's life. It constitutes murder instead of just self-sacrifice. And there's this big long speech. But then Hugo's careful to say that Courfeyrac doesn't think for 1 second about his own mother. So he tells everyone else to think about their mothers, but he doesn't consider his own. He's going to die. He's one of the selfish, according to his own definition. I wasn't sure what Hugo wanted us to take away from that scene. Are both of these noble and good, to go home and protect your family, or to stay here and die for the sake of a principle? It seemed complicated.
I wonder, it does seem complicated. And I think we noted this in War and Peace too, that there are some ways in which I wonder if the narrative elements complicate the kind of what Ian would call Pat philosophy that overlays the top of it, that he introduces scenes that make those statements more complex.
Well, I agree. And I wished I had the conscious thought as I was reading this time that he had lightened up on the philosophy sections a little bit and just let the genre that he's chosen speak for itself. Because those scenes that are human and plot heavy and character driven are more thought-provoking and powerful. At least to me, they were more thought-provoking and powerful when it came to his philosophy than the sections where he stepped out and did a prose chapter.
Agreed.
And I think that he's a really gifted storyteller, and his story, it works, and it does communicate all these themes and stir your heart and your emotions and make you consider a revolution to be a worthy thing, and consider the role of strong men in their families and in their communities to be a worthy thing as well. That scene would have spoken for itself. And I don't think we needed the philosophy section before and after and during and all around it. Yeah.
Why do you guys, this is kind of a out of left field question, but why do you guys think that he chose to open this book with a meditation on completely different barricades, the 1848 barricades, the Charbonnis and Scylla, as opposed to
I had an idea about
I guess
Go ahead, Ian, you first.
To walk back some of the, not to walk back, you listen again, rewind, listen to all of my complaints again.
Don't
glory in it. Glory in the complaints. Victor Hugo deserves them. But I will say, I think he introduces those barricades because he wants us to understand he's chosen this particular moment to tell the story of this much smaller flash in the pan, in order to make a point that ironically, not all of these revolutionary actions on the part of the people are the final word in a conflict, right? That they build.
He tells us in his philosophy section that he's more sympathetic to those failed causes, that he thinks he's trying to elicit our compassion instead of our disdain towards those kind of things. So that maybe it does explain why he has chosen 1832 as his subject matter instead of 1848.
Right. And simply that 1832 leads to 1848.
Right.
That one wouldn't have happened without the other.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of trying to elicit our compassion as well. And the thing that stuck in my mind as he was describing those other 2 barricades is that he uses the barricade as an image of the man who built it. So he
Mhm.
characterizes the barricade. He gives it a personality. He draws our emotions into it. And then he says, the man who built this barricade, he's shown his personality in it. And here's what becomes of him. I think we're guided then to think of Enjolras's barricade as an example of him. And here we have, it's completely hopeless. There's actually no escape in his barricade. If you think of the construction of it, there's no chance for retreat. And that is absolutely a characterization of him as a model of the revolutionary and of all of the way this turns out. And I think that he's trying to elicit our compassion and he's trying to stir our hearts the same way.
Yeah, that's
But the
interesting.
barricade seemed to be an image.
A prison, which comes up again in this section. I like that.
Also, thinking more of like the shape of things, the shape of the barricade, the construction of the room behind the barricade, where it used to be a drinking room, but now it's like a mortuary. There's a lot of the image of the cross over and over again.
Yeah, I noticed that.
What do you guys think about that?
I marked that passage too, with the Javert standing against the pole and Mabeuf on the table. They form a cross. I couldn't if it were me making this image, I would have like Jean Valjean as one of the beams, but it's because Javert, justice, Valjean, mercy, but instead I don't quite understand Mabeuf's symbolic role in that cross.
I think Mabeuf has become, in particular because of the manner of his death, he's become a symbol for humanity ground under the wheel of civilization, of society. And Javert stands for order in that society.
And the wheel that ground him. Yeah.
Right, exactly. It seems to be more of the focus on the revolution rather than the theological conversation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Agreed.
Since it's placed within the barricade, that makes sense.
That might be part of why I'm so steamed, because I'm really here for the other story. And he's been trying to drag in this, and I just I'm not as with him as I would be.
But wait, I took us off in this direction, and we were doing a really good job of summarizing the actual action of this scene. And we do touch on that other theological conversation in the action. So the first thing that happens is the barricade. There begins to be fighting on the barricade. And the second thing that happens is Jean Valjean shows up and offers his own National Guard outfit to save one more life. 5 guys get sent off to live their lives and cry about it. And the rest of them are ready to sacrifice themselves. But Jean Valjean is like this quiet presence who's providing safety and care. And he's just kind of silently a provisional character.
Yeah.
Until
without killing. Yeah.
He never kills, but he is constantly protecting, taking care of the wounded, etc. Until he realizes that Javert is back in the drinking house with Hucheloup or whatever his name is, his drinking house. What is that place called? I've got to remember the name of it.
Corinth.
Oh yeah.
The Corinth.
The Corinth. Okay, so back in the Corinth, Javert is there, and suddenly Jean Valjean and Javert are going to have a face-off.
Yeah.
And I thought this was the coolest little action part of our scene, because of course, those of you who've seen the movie, this is or seen the stage play or anything, this is a super thematically rich scene where Javert expects and is kind of gloating at the idea of Jean Valjean killing him as revenge. And he's surprised at Jean Valjean's mercy.
Or in his own words, irritated.
Yeah.
Irritated.
Kind of breaks him. Yeah.
But I love that we don't get to see the consequence of that mercy yet. We just watch him be irritated and walk off free. Down the street. And I just am so excited to see how this turns out.
Well, and I also love the added detail that I haven't seen a stage play or a film introduce yet, that Marius watches this happen, realizes what's happening, and has a previous connection with Javert, right? Who gave him the pistols and helped him with the Thénardiers and all of that. And so he rushes off, and then too late, and here's the shot. So he now believes that Valjean, he doesn't know it's Valjean, right? He thinks it's
murdered a police officer.
Right? Murdered a police officer. So now there's an added layer of confusion surrounding Valjean's character from one of our other principal characters, who happens to be in love with his daughter Cosette, and we haven't even gotten to her yet.
I would love to talk about my man Marius.
Yeah,
go ahead, Emily.
My first question is, what the actual heck is he thinking?
I love that question. What a great start.
he sees, so he sent off this letter to Cosette. He has been in despair because he is convinced that Cosette was taken by her father off to England. He thinks they're gone.
Right.
And then her father walks in the barricade and he is still full of despair, even though there is actual proof that the family is still in France.
I know.
Why is he still so determined to sacrifice
Well, I think Hugo
himself?
would look at you with a blank stare and say, well, despair is like the ecstasy of a revolution. So
It's exactly what he would say.
despair explains everything, Emily.
So
You can't argue with it.
It's the Frenchest of French stories. So, okay, can I say one other thing about Valjean, though?
Yes, but then we have to
we have to talk about Marius.
Yeah, I think it's really funny that Valjean can't be the hero unless he's a crack shot with a rifle.
I know. I loved that. And also sneaky skills. He's a sniper.
Sneaky skills. He's such a sniper, in fact, that he can Lone Ranger style, I kid you not, he can shoot people's helmets off without shooting their heads off. I mean, he is an absolute god of war who refuses to use his god of war status.
Actually, though I am laughing, to use the phrase God of War in this particular scene that is so
Kind of
rich with Greek mythology is very appropriate.
Yeah.
You've got Enjolras' Apollo on the other hand.
Yeah.
So why can't Jean Valjean be the God of War?
Yeah. Fair
I
enough.
do think it's interesting that Hugo spends a lot of time being torn. Maybe that's not the right way to put it, but he recognizes both that these revolutions have to fight they have to break their own principles in order to get what they want.
Yeah.
So that scene where Enjolras and I think it's Courfeyrac or Combeferre, I forget which one, are looking out at the artillery guard, and he says,
Oh, yeah.
What do you see?
He's beautiful.
Yeah, and Enjolras says he's my brother, and they have to kill him. Even so, even though his companion says, please don't kill him.
Combeferre says, don't kill him. Can we just not kill him?
And so, but Enjolras knows that they have to. And so the violence breaks the principles that are leading the revolution.
Yeah.
And Hugo tells us that he knows that's necessary. He wants us to have compassion on them. And yet his protagonist is not a part of that revolution or that insurrection or uprising or whatever the heck he wants to call it now. So again, I think that complicates what is going on here at the barricade, that we are supposed to honor these men, the tragic sacrifice of life in the name of progress, which Hugo is saying is worthy. And at the same time, it is not the ideal. And Jean Valjean kind of is in his role as a protector without engaging in the violence.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should stress it. I mean, there's been a lot of hilarity over Hugo's foibles in this episode, which I think is appropriate. He's said some crazy stuff. We haven't even gotten to the craziest part yet. But also, it is high drama, and it is full of pathos, and it is very, very difficult to watch these young men die, because the fundamentals of the situation are they are not the only people, they thought, pursuing this uprising. They thought this was a popular uprising, and there was every indication that there would be barricades like this all over the city, and that the people of France, the oppressed, were going to rise. And what basically happens is everybody else goes, not really into this, and leaves these boys out there by themselves with no hope of rescue.
Literally right outside their doors. I thought the most heartbreaking scene was when he steps back and says, by the way, all of these buildings all around the barricade are full of people who they're just plugging their ears to the screams of the boys.
They won't open their doors.
Schoolboys outside the doors, banging on their doors, begging for their lives, and they're going to let them die.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, that is,
it's
like you said, full of pathos.
Yeah.
What it leads me to wonder, though, you guys, is in the thematic or philosophical conversation, what Enjolras and I think Hugo are saying over and over again is this is a story of death and rebirth. This is the light of the future coming to meet the darkness of the past, and we're moving forward into the light. But also the scene that he's painting, I can't get over emotionally how it just feels stillborn.
Yeah.
This feels meaningless. It
Mhm.
really does. And all of those men die, and none of the people rise. And on the one hand, okay, take a larger view, step back and look at history. This is one, tiny stone in the river of progress. And I think Hugo would say all those things to me. But the story that he's offered me, I can't get over the conflict and the contrast
Right.
there.
It feels like a
stillborn.
lament.
It doesn't feel like a redemptive resurrection story, at least for the boys.
Yeah.
Except for on the individual level of Javert and Marius, who
Right.
are saved by Valjean from the clutches of death.
Well, and even Grantaire, right? And
Ooh, I don't know. I
just
thought that was really
brutal
dark.
and sad.
I thought
Well,
that
of
was
course
the
it's
worst part.
dark. They're both
Yeah.
they're being slaughtered. On the other hand, what we've seen from Grantaire is this desire to be noble, like Enjolras, right?
Mhm.
That he looks up to and idolizes. And I think even the last time we saw Grantaire, Enjolras said something cutting to him, right? That he maybe deserved.
Yeah, he's been drunk asleep through this whole thing.
Yeah, he's been sitting there drunk through the whole thing.
Kind of impressive.
Yeah, no kidding.
I know. When he staggered to his feet, I thought, how did you sleep through this?
But his immediate response to waking up in the situation is, "Oh, I'm dying with you." And then he turns to Enjolras and says, will you permit me?" Basically. And it felt to me like we've seen an Enjolras who is captive to a vision and who is going to make this dramatic sacrifice because he believes it's meaningful. We, the readers, have some doubts about whether it is, but he thinks it is. And it's inhuman. It's made of him something implacable and godlike. And
well, he's not touched by any weapons or bullets for the entire scene until the end.
He's another god of war.
He's a god.
Well, he's called Apollo by the other army.
Right.
And also a flower, which I thought was funny. It's as though I'm about to shoot a flower, the National Guard
which is interesting. And this isn't what we should talk about next, but the garden, the Luxembourg garden.
Oh yeah, we got to talk about that soon.
Hugo is all about flowers, and it's interesting that I would not have drawn a link between flowers and Enjolras.
But he's on about the beauty of youth and idealism, right? There's a way in which only the young can be revolutionaries like the ones he's trying to paint, because they don't know enough. They don't know enough yet to not be swept completely away by these ideas. They don't know enough yet to realize that they are small. And what that means is occasionally they are anything but small, because their commitment overawes the people around them.
And there's something compelling about it. I mean, Enjolras pinned to a wall with bullets is fine, but my Enjolras hangs from a flag, having fallen out a window, right? And your heart leaps at that for whatever reason. I don't know.
Well, he makes a bunch of comparisons of the situation to other heroic moments in history. Leonidas and the 300 Spartans, for example, and it's romanticism. It's a little overblown, but he has successfully captured the inspiring, heartening, blood quickeningness of these kinds of situations. And I thought the scene was beautiful, heart-wrenching, but beautiful with Enjolras and Grantaire.
But Emily, you said it would be easier to find redemption in those other plot lines as this is going on. Like this one, you really have to dig for the redemptive theme, and you have to kind of glory in the tragedy. But there might be redemption in Marius's plotline, or there might be redemption in Javert's plotline. What did you mean?
Well, with Marius in particular, it's kind of Hugo allows it to stand above the political revolutionary ideas, in that Marius is, well, I don't want to get too ahead. We have so much to talk about in Marius's storyline, but he is rescued from sacrificing himself for an ideal by the particular, by Jean Valjean, who decides, in spite of knowing that this boy intends to steal his daughter from him, he takes him and rescues him from this situation. And to me, that allows, this is why I think it's complex, the particular relationship is allowed to be more important for Marius than the revolution. And that is actually something that in his philosophy, Hugo kind of lamented, that the individual needs of the interests of the people are standing against progress. But it's good here that Marius is rescued, I think.
Yeah,
He
I think
doesn't
so,
have
too.
to he doesn't have to do the Enjolras thing. He is getting a chance to be reborn and have life.
Mm.
That life is a life of relationship, not a life of ideals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
makes much over and over again of the fact that Enjolras has never had a romantic relationship.
Patria, my lover.
Patria.
Yeah, and it's humorous in the way that youthful ideals are humorous, but it's also a tragedy from Hugo's perspective, right? And even from the perspective of Enjolras's friends. When he kisses Mabeuf twice, and they're the only two kisses he's ever given, is the way Hugo puts it. So there's something about Marius's arc that I think Hugo would say is provided and protected by Enjolras.
That's good. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
That's part of what makes it so gripping, I think.
Well, while Marius is risking his life on the battlefield for some reason entirely unknown to me, I hope you guys can enlighten me, Hugo changes our perspective to his lover Cosette waking up on this beautiful barricade morning.
And being delighted and having a great day, he thinks, because her bed is so pretty and white. Because apparently Cosette is a ninny.
Because she's a ninny.
There's so many problems with this scene. So many problems.
We can
Could
laugh
it
at
be that he says we mustn't talk about virginity, and then he does for pages and pages? Could it be that?
I think, as the kids say, it's pretty cringe.
It's
This
pretty
bit on
cringe.
Cosette is pretty cringe.
You guys, I just can't get over that she's an idiot. Like this, even if we're romanticizing womanhood, this is offensive. What she says as she hears the barricade noise out her window is, it's weird that people are opening and shutting carriage doors this early in the morning. You're not a child. What is the matter with you?
Listen,
I
I've heard some
resent this
carriage doors
association.
open and shut in my day, and they don't sound like cannons. Okay.
Oh, idiot. But also, all of the imagery of the scene, he's holding her up, Hugo is, as the representative of that hope. She is dawn embodied. She is light. She's beautiful. She's the thing that Marius has hope in. He's going to go and have a future only if Cosette stays the way that he's presented her. She's like stuck in time. She's frozen in time as the hope for Marius. And I think I can see that is thematically necessary, that she represents like family and future and relationship. Like you were saying, that's all of the thematic associations and allusions are to light and dawn and resurrection.
Yeah.
You know, I just can't get over that I don't respect her as a person.
Well, she's so clearly an object to Hugo. I mean, I could barely read the lines where he's like elevating, and he wants to be elevating the beauty of innocent virgin youth or whatever, and he wants to talk about her casual nakedness of which she's afraid. You're like, what? Excuse me?
Also, like,
what?
Has he ever like actually hung out with him? I know he has. The thing with Hugo is that he was
unfortunately
a womanizer.
Huge womanizer.
Yeah.
Well, that seems clear in this section. I mean, it's a little rapey.
I did read as a little rapey.
Okay.
Oh, man.
I just had to get that out there.
But she is, I mean, she is a symbol more than she's a person.
She's an object.
And
she's
to his credit, he has given us Eponine, who comes up again.
Yes. Oh, man.
In this section. And Eponine is not a symbol. She is a person. So he has done it. He can do it. He just chose violence.
He chose not to.
Also, I just also can't get over the fact that he apparently has no self-control. Because there are multiple times, and this happens in the philosophical sections and in the Cosette section, where he tells you that he's not going to say it and then goes, okay, and says it anyway, right? Like, in extreme cases, we may introduce the reader into a nuptial chamber, but not into a virgin's bedroom. Verse would hardly dare. Prose should not. And it's interior. I mean, I swear, like
Oh,
he,
I
honest
know.
to goodness, says that and then goes about describing her bedroom
I know.
here. And then and later on, he says, the indiscreet touch of the eye desecrates this dim penumbra, whatever that means. Here,
Penumbra.
to
Goodness.
gaze is to profane. And I just wrote LOL in the margins because here we are gazing right along with Hugo,
Could
the
I
old
mean,
lech.
could
Yeah,
that
I
be
know.
intentional? Could
Well, what do you mean, Emily?
What does he want us to do?
Let
Skip
us
the
go here.
chapter? Does he want us to
What?
go? Does he want us to go evangelical parent style and fast forward? or
No,
something?
no.
Grab your
I'm
Sharpies, everyone.
you know, we always allow the author, like we have to give the author credit. It's possible that you're right that he doesn't have self-control, but could it also be intentional that we are profaning Cosette in some way, and that's the tension between the ideal and the real in this scene.
But wouldn't it follow then that making the ideal into a particular is profaning?
Well, I think that's actually kind of what's going on in this whole book. That's the barricades, right? It's
That's a very smart comment, Emily.
Yeah, that's a
well,
really good comment.
thank
It
you. I
is.
don't know. I don't know if it's real. I'm just
No
trying
idea.
here. I'm just, I'm planting a flag. I don't know if I might take it back later. I might be taking it back right now.
Yeah.
That's a really good comment.
I think that's a very intelligent comment. On the other hand, by that definition, God profanes when he creates.
Well, that's part of the romantic. That's part of the issue. I obviously have my own issues with romantic philosophy. I'm just trying to inhabit Hugo's world here.
Well, it is a good question you bring up, though. Like, are we doing the work a disservice as readers by snickering behind our hands
Being
at the
annoyed,
romanticism? And I don't think so. I mean, I think we, in the very nature of the way we run this show, are giving him his due for months. You know what I mean?
It is a little bit like having a close friend at this point, and we love him by
It's all in
ribbing
good
him.
fun.
Oh yeah, we made even harsher fun of Tolstoy at times. I think
we spent with Tolstoy. It was like the company. What is it? Company is good for 3 days and then it goes bad. We spent way too long with
long.
Tolstoy.
He needed to go home to Russia.
Go home to Russia.
So I'm thinking, though, because of your comment, Emily, about the ideal meeting the particular, and the only one who can really successfully particularize the ideal is God, the ultimate creator, and how that dovetails with romanticism. All of that reminds me of the scene in the Luxembourg Gardens, where he describes, with big, long, flowery descriptions, tulip beds. Actually, he describes tulips and flowers for a really long time. And the end of his big, long rumination is this paragraph that I just want to draw our attention to. It's on page 1217. The abundance of light was inexpressibly comforting. Life, sap, warmth, odor overflowed. Beneath creation, you felt the enormity of its source. In all these breezes, saturated with love, in this coming and going of reflections and reverberations, in this prodigious expenditure of rays, in this indefinite outlay of fluid gold, you felt the prodigality of the inexhaustible. And behind this splendor, as behind a curtain of flame, you caught a glimpse of God, millionaire of the stars.
Absolutely gorgeous. Wow.
I mean, for all his bloviating, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think might draw into focus Hugo's take on romanticism, which doesn't stop with, look at all of these overblown dramatic feelings, but uses them as a way to emphasize the nature of God.
Yeah.
And that project I do identify with. That project I think is worthy. And I think the image of flowers, which he has now used to relate to the little boys who are in the Luxembourg garden, they are like flowers. The flowers are for them in some ways. Angel Ross is a flower. It's a symbol of innocence that should be protected. I don't know. This seems like the flower is the particularization of something beautiful and good, and created by God and blessed with that association. I don't know. What do you guys think of all that?
Well, I love that too. And he even acknowledges a flaw that is in keeping with some of the things we were saying, which is that some people look at that nature, or he even says that God, and forget the particular, right? That they spend so much time worshiping nature that they forget about reality, and that
and they're
is
crippled. Those who do that are crippled.
Yeah.
Wow.
So talking about this Luxembourg Gardens thing, we should probably take a second to have a moment of respectful silence for Gavroche.
Yep. Yeah. The other, I had underlined the passage Megan just read as one of the prettiest things in this novel so far. The other one is Gavroche's final moments, which maybe aren't as beautiful in terms of the prose, but as a symbol of the revolution and as a symbol of the posture of oppressed mankind in relationship to its oppressors. I just haven't ever read anything quite as good. It is spectacular.
What do you guys make of his song that continually, I mean, his last verse I underlined, but it continually makes reference to Voltaire and Rousseau and kind of blames them for his experience. I don't know. Oh, here we go. The translation on page 1213 of the last verse that he sings is, I dropped from the air because of Voltaire, to the gutter I go because of Rousseau, ... Is this joy is my nature because of Voltaire, misery is my trousseau because of Rousseau? What is Hugo saying about the role of French intellectual history in this moment?
If I knew more about French intellectual history, I'd have an answer.
I know.
I was hoping someone else would know
I
more.
wish that I was all brushed up on my Voltaire and my Rousseau. We should probably go ahead and do that. But I think maybe your comment is leading, though, Emily, that they represent Enlightenment thinking, or I don't know, this philosophy of reason as the ultimate perfectibility of man.
Yeah.
Here we have the little particular Gavroche shaking his fist in the face of all of that philosophy.
Yep.
Well, and it consumes itself, which is to go back to the gardens where his little brothers are hanging out, around the section you were reading, Hugo says something like, all the animals were provided with food to eat and they sometimes ate each other, but all was well.
Yeah.
I think that might be what's going on here. And it's all in the name of the ideals that the French philosophers posited, but as a result, there's a part of progress in which they consume themselves on the journey towards it.
Yeah, which isn't even necessarily an argument. It's just a lament. It's an observation.
Yeah.
And that extends to a lot of places besides France, though Hugo thinks France is its beating center, apparently. And it's a great comment. I think it's absolutely true and eloquent. And to make it a little boy who is fatherless and motherless and abandoned, and is nevertheless completely full of ebullient joy all of the time. It's just, man, it's one of the most poignant things I've ever read, I think.
Yeah, that line that I read, the joy is my nature because of Voltaire, misery is my trousseau because of Rousseau, that in itself seems to embody what you're saying.
Yeah.
Both
His
joy and misery. Yeah.
As we look at one of the most miserable characters in the story and we admire him and kind of turn him to face the light as we're, wishing him goodbye, I couldn't help but think of that theme that we've been coming back to over and over again. Every time Hugo offers us the darkest that human nature can be, like the lowest that a human being can sink to, there is some kind of reference to the sky and rain. And that's been happening since the very beginning when we first saw Jean Valjean walking through a field, shaking his fist at the heavens, right? Yeah. If it rains, there is an answer from the heavens for you. If it doesn't, maybe there isn't, kind of a thing. And here in the Luxembourg Gardens, where we have Gavroche's little brothers, and we know that their protector, Gavroche, has just died in the chapter right before. And here they are. They're not even being fed food that's good for the swans. I mean, they're lower than animals.
Stressed me out. The bun,
it's just horrible.
The bun,
they take it out
soaking.
of the gross swan water. I mean, the whole thing's gross. But in this moment, the bourgeoisie says it's going to rain musket balls, and then he looks up at the clouds, and perhaps too, the rain itself is going to rain. The heavens are joining in. I wrote at the top of the page a little fall of rain because I think again the people who designed and directed the musical were right on point thematically. But
Oh,
that
yeah.
fall of rain waters these flowers, and there's this redemptive image, even though human nature's at its lowest, that there is a participation from the heavens, and
Yeah.
there's someone seeing their suffering, and he'll water them, and
Hmm.
they'll grow.
And sometimes it rains musket balls, and that is
Mhm.
also part of the rain
Yeah.
that redeems.
Yep.
Yeah, I do think, Megan, to your point, that there is a constant underlying Hugo's philosophy, and that constant is God is not silent.
Yes, he's involved and invested and joining in. I think that's a theme.
Yeah,
That's
even
encouraging.
when it could rightly be said, where were you? How could you let this
Mhm.
happen? Right?
Mhm.
He is looking for an architect in all of this.
Mhm.
Mm.
Oh man, the brioche bun. Poke that in your gun.
Well, and even that is a poignant comment, right?
Yeah.
These boys
Yep.
are learning to act like Gavroche. Whew. Okay, that was really heavy, guys. Nice
know.
job. Really
know.
good. I'm proud of both of you. Thank you, Hugo, for your beautiful comments.
On to next. It's coming, you guys.
Behold.
Marius has been
What, the one day more?
taken
No,
down into the sewers.
into the sewers. So do you feel a
Oh,
little bit like
finally.
everyone who's ever told you about this book was lying to you?
They lied to me.
They lied to me. I was told that there would be sewers. That's what I was told.
Instead, what
they're
there
coming.
was is Hugo, the little brother of Tolstoy, bloviating.
Bloviating. No, the sewers are coming. Valjean and Marius have escaped down into the sewers. And I think we're about to understand what all the fuss was about with the sewers. So good luck. Good luck to all. I appreciate you guys joining us.
Yeah.
Really, really like to hear your comments, corrections, complaints on the Facebook page.
I don't know about complaints. Don't tell us those.
Don't tell them. Keep those to yourselves. So go off to your readings again, and we will see you soon on how to eat an elephant. Bon appetit.
Bon appetit.
Bon appetit.